It's Kate Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. I'm back today with Kate Connell. We've had many great conversations before. She's done presentations on equitable aquatics. We've chatted about making first aid more accessible. Today, we're going to be talking about the big elephant in the room, AI in aquatics. Welcome back, Kate. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this polarizing topic in aquatics. Our start to this conversation was someone asking an anonymous question for your newsletter. And it got me thinking specifically as it relates to AI and thought leadership. And if we are changing the game with how we assign someone expertise status in aquatics, and if AI is potentially thinning it out and taking away some of those prior indicators we used to have around what would make you a thought leader. So prior to AI, it was tenure in the field and lived experience, and some of the ways that maybe you interpreted classic aquatic topics with a different spin that set you apart or helped you have that perspective. Now there's so much information coming through with AI that maybe we've helped some people be able to say more, but maybe they're actually saying less because AI is making it less potent, and there's a lot of noise, but maybe the noise isn't as articulate, or it's just more people saying things but not really saying anything that's innovative or new.
I totally agree. I'll link to the newsletter in the description box down below for anybody who wants to read it. I think there's so many facets to this. If we zoom out of aquatics specifically, I know, at least in my algorithm, what I see when I'm scrolling on social media is constant ads to encourage me as a business owner, a working professional, a busy person, to come up with shortcuts in my life, that my emails are going to be better written and my workplace procedures are going to be done for me. I think what professionals are also receiving that messaging, but they're also feeling the very real pinch point of doing more with less in a crushing economy, busy families, staff facilities. So people are looking for more help in the field to do their job to the best they can. It's not clear where AI can help legitimately.
What's really tough about AI is that I think there's some value-based decisions that go into this too, because there's obviously implications on the environmental side and the equity side with AI. We've talked about equity a ton together, but every system is based off what is considered norms. It has proven to be the case that AI is going to perpetuate some of these fallacies around equity. All of us are just trying to do the best that we can. So finding ways to leverage that is really attractive. The responsibility is on us to do it responsibly. It's kind of like recycling. In the US, we've had such a push to recycle, 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 as if single people recycling can replace the damage being done by corporations towards climate change. It feels a lot like that to me. Like we're personally responsible for robots taking over the world if we decide to use it for optimization. I don't have that mentality. Extremism is problematic, especially in DEI work. I do try to take more of that moderate, middle of the road take, because you have to meet everybody where they're at. I don't want to demonize something I think is actually helpful and can even help some people get ahead in certain ways. For me, finding help with AI on things that are especially like replicatable and system oriented can be really helpful. Where we want to be more discernment is maybe when we're making things more generic, or we are not providing enough nuance or context in AI, that we really need to use more critical thinking. I think that's the difference. When we talk about DEI, we've talked a lot about the curiosity and the critical thinking is missing. I think that's the same thing happening here, where we're just automatically using some of that stuff. I think there's a lot of ways to use it as an aquatics professional. You're writing things and having it do more editing, helping it help you be more intentional with what you're trying to say, but not necessarily letting AI be your voice. I think some of the hangups people do have is when the voice and the message is being outsourced to AI. I think you have to still be really clear about what is the voice that I have, whether that's me as, an agency that runs swimming lessons, or is that as me as Kate who does consulting on equity. So not outsourcing that part, but using it for your everyday processes that before you were having to really do things manually, using more spreadsheets and things like that. I also think you have to go back to your value system. So for me, there's things that I am entrepreneurial, just like you are, Katie, and I have a full-time job, but I also make money in the industry as a thought leader. So for me, I'm also trying to think of what's my responsibility to make sure that I'm not using AI to outsource other people's work. The visual marketing of things like logos and design, flyers, and things like that are entire industries. I do think those are things that set you apart in the market. So you can be learning about design through the use of AI, but still ultimately will benefit from finding a way to pay a local graphic designer, for example, to help get your base of colors and then teach yourself through the process of AI. I think that's still the best practice. Some of the things we heard when I shared this in the Facebook group were people are going to make decisions based on their own personal values when they're spending money. And they're going to do this at work too. So that goes in both directions, and people do that in their professional setting. It's also important for us to be aware of where we can use AI to further our values, or when we start to vary from them. If it's important for us to support local, finding ways to make sure we still lean into that and we're using AI to replicate things. We're not outsourcing to other people, but we're outsourcing to ourselves. Makes a lot of sense to be considerate of.
I want to unpack a couple things you brought up. The email is a great example. I had dinner last night with another aquatic colleague. We were talking about AI, and I said I turned off the AI editor on my email platform because I found it was cutting out all the words that reflected my tone of voice and my speech and what's unique about me as a person and the services I provide. It's funny because the other person said, oh, well, I turned it on because I need editing. My emails are too vague and imprecise. And as a director, I need to get to the point faster. Maybe with more training, my email provider would get to know me better. But in the initial time that I had it on, which maybe wasn't long enough for it to truly learn my speech patterns and preferences, the recommendations were completely off base. It was interesting to see something so widely divergent for two similar colleagues. But to your point, that could be an incredibly helpful tool if you have frontline staff at a rec center where you have a shared email account like front desk at facilityx.com, and you want to have standardized practices for consistent and equitable policy enforcement. That would be the kind of thing that I presume AI could learn your policies and really hone in on what is and is not appropriate language for frontline staff to be using.
Absolutely. I love that example too, because I think it centers humanness back into the use of AI. And that is the big piece, I think, that people buy from other people, learn from other people, engage and want to support other people. And so if you're bringing your own humanness into how you use AI, I think that's where a lot of intention can come up, and you can say, where can this actually help me? I don't think that everyone needs to outsource every single thing to AI. In fact, I think that's when we're going to see even more of that homogenous. We're all just saying and doing the same thing. It's finding where it can help you with certain pieces. A big part of that is knowing thyself and then being able to say, this is how it'll help me, this is how it won't help me. And those are both really great examples, because for some people, email takes a lot of mental load that can save them time to be able to not use AI to develop staff training or coach their team, and things that AI is not going to be a substitute for those types of connections, critical thinking, expertise, and thought leadership.
I think AI has become such a big catch-all for automation and technology tools. Speaking for myself, it took me a long time to get into something as simple as email templates within my business for replicable tools. That is not AI. There's a gap, in my opinion, where I'm seeing this glomming on in the public sphere of aquatics. All automation is bad because in the old days, we did everything very hands-on, very much from scratch. I think there's a general fear of automation in terms of how that might impact safety or quality or risk management. But AI is not the same thing as simple tools that are replicable, transferable, scalable, and appropriate. Airline pilots use checklists. They use standardized templates. Why shouldn't we in aquatics?
I think in some ways, the things that have plagued the industry have been in part because we have not adopted from other industries and brought us up to modern times. That's why there is a lot of burnout, because we keep doing more and more and more as times change. More and more gets dropped on the plate of the traditional aquatics professional, and we haven't found ways to optimize. Are there ways to do that without false confidence? AI can do everything. We're still the experts, but how do we quiet some of the admin stuff so that way we can really fully engage in other areas? Automation is now equaling AI, but that didn't used to be the case, like you're saying. Automation is the backbone of franchises. McDonald's is built on the idea of automation, where you get the same experience, the same tasting food, the same process, whether you're in California or Calgary. Automation isn't a bad thing, but if we're only automating by use of AI, then yeah, we're probably going to get into some problems. I think we have to be mindful. There are positive ways for us to use automation based on our own value system. Where can AI step in and help with that? Ultimately, that lets us focus on the stuff we love about our jobs in aquatics and also on the safety component in those aspects.
It's also important to understand there are definitely some tasks that we as aquatic professionals repeat quarterly, like your programming. I'm sure everybody listening to this at some point has done copy paste in their booking software to replicate a preschool lesson from fall to winter or from summer 2025 to summer 2026. That is a form of automation or efficiency that is appropriate. You go in and you change the class dates, the instructor, the pool allocation. That is how we are able to do, frankly, so much in our roles. Our roles are completely unreasonable as aquatic professionals. The number of fields we're expected to manage on a day to day basis is, frankly, outrageous in some ways. I remember when scheduling software really started to be a thing in my area of Alberta, starting in roughly 2013, 14, 15, and like when to work, for example, where you could tell the software to fill in shifts or assign people. And it wasn't perfect because you had to ensure staff qualifications were met. Do you have an aqua fitness instructor on an aquafit class, or do you have a senior guard with a junior guard? Availability, all of that had to be tailored. But at the end of the day, for me, doing a relatively small facility schedule for 35 to 40 people, it cut my scheduling time in half, gave me back those hours to work on other things. What I'm hoping people do take from this conversation is fear of AI cause people to stop any engagement with technology, and that's not a solution either.
AI use, it shouldn't really be detectable. I think the part that is making people feel really polarized is when it's evident that businesses are using AI. And honestly, this is generally happening in social media, in the copy of the post, the content, the written verbiage of the post, or it's happening in graphic design that is very clearly AI. The aquatics ones all look the same, or it's the flyer we're seeing in like the municipal recreation space. They're all a little bit different, but they all still feel like they're the same. I think that's part of it too. We need to learn how AI can enhance, not completely replace, or use it to enhance what you're doing. You use it to be able to focus more on time on task, like ROI. What are you spending the most time on that has the best percent of results? And how do you spend less time on the stuff that doesn't matter quite as much or eats up most of your attention and energy? There's the 80-20 principle that every entrepreneur knows about, that 80% of your output drives 20% of your results and vice versa. One of the things we haven't talked about is when it comes to administrative outsourcing to AI, the worst case scenario is someone doesn't buy from you or doesn't participate in your programs because their values don't align and they're noticing that you're using AI to write, marketing, for example, or to complete your website, things like that. But obviously, there could be some ethical concerns on the side of using AI as it relates to staffing and training. And if we're investing in AI instead of staffing and training, that obviously could be problematic.
It's really important that aquatic professionals, as any adult does, need to make ethical decisions based on your own moral or business or organizational value proposition. Unfortunately, I see too much in aquatics this herd mentality. If I copy at my facility what the facility does down the road or in my jurisdiction or with the same lifeguard training agency, then I'm covered. And that broad stroke doesn't work, frankly. People need to identify for themselves and saying, I want to use automation or technology tools or AI for these specific things. And they are in alignment with ethical choices, values, and organizational policies as well. Because you could have a whole separate conversation about servers and data storage and privacy and compliance and equity.
If you've plugged any information into AI and tried to get stuff out, it's best at really, really broad information, or it's best when you feed it really, really specific information and you keep refining, 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 refining. My big cautionary reminder to people is we don't need more broad insights. We need things that feel really rooted in experience and nuance and niche things. You and I both present on really niched things. And that's why we love to talk about this stuff too, because that's where I get really excited. Because one of my own metrics is I don't ever want anybody to feel like they've heard it all before or it's the same thing and it's just repurposed. No one has time to be fed thought leadership that's not different or really getting them to think more critically. I guess that would be my call to anybody that is more on that thought leadership side, where if you're developing content, asking those questions, if people are going to take time away from their busy professional life, is this Is this just a repeating herd mentality concepts, or can we find some ways to be more innovative and try to find ways to make sure that we're getting a message that's really worth people taking the time to listen to?
One of the conversations last night with my colleagues was exactly that. They were reporting a newsletter they receive, and they felt the newsletter had gone downhill because maybe in an effort to keep up with the publishing frequency, the writers were now using a lot more AI, as in, give me some in service ideas, which might at the surface seem not all that bad. But as I suggested in my newsletter a few weeks ago, when you get granular, it might offer you a lesson plan. It might offer you technical information if you're handing that lesson plan off to a junior staff member who's not themselves qualified as, for example, a first aid instructor, and there's no audit process or no leadership about how we're using this material in a formal or informal setting. It becomes a whole rabbit trail of responsibility and potentially not aligned with our risk management policies. I'm not trying to be alarmist, but sometimes a kernel is there of a good idea, but we need to be more critical of where we're going with this information.
Always fact checking too. A lot of people have issues that information might not be technically correct. I is not going to necessarily know all of the nuance and all different pieces, but it's also potentially going to make things seem a lot easier than they are. I spend a lot of time when I'm talking and giving presentations being like, well, it depends and it's nuanced. And I also think one size isn't fits all. The more that we lean on AI to deliver original ideas, essentially, to say things like plan a lifeguard training, we really are continuing to perpetuate some of that like weakness in the industry. People don't need more information. They need better information. We are absolutely drowning in information overload. People really need a lot of help with the execution of things. And that's something I think is really central to the work both of us do is not just the what, but it's the how. Finding ways to make sure we're not contributing to that perpetual vacuum, I think is also a responsibility we all have. People are a lot smarter than we think with being able to interpret what they're seeing and knowing if it's human generated or not. And websites will say now, this is AI generated at the top of a post on social media. And then people keep scrolling. We only have so many chances to really build trust with people if we're businesses or brands. Eventually, I'm going to stop engaging and I'm going to take note that your presentation, even if it's at a conference, felt very generic or it looked very AI generated, or I'm going to notice that the same type of post is being generated by the same person and it feels spammy. I do think we're going to see more AI technology specifically jump into our different systems and potentially promise things like being able to take over watching water and keeping things safe. We're going to have to all work together to really set the tone for what we'll accept in the industry and how we work towards making the industry safer, even with these additional technology and components that enter the space.
To your point, the person I was speaking with last night said, I opened the newsletter, but pretty quickly I delete it. If it looks AI generated again, the whole conversation was them saying, my opinion of this brand and the provider has gone downhill. I would say to any business owner, just don't send the newsletter, change the frequency, move the date, or skip a week if you need to, because we all get busy. That's been my guiding star for me in my newsletter. If there's nothing valuable to say, don't send it, because people do not need another email in their inbox. And frankly, that is why there's been so much interest in listening to audio recordings of the newsletter where I just chat about the topics, because we're all trying to maximize our time with unrealistic expectations about multitasking. Let me listen to something instead of read it.
I love that. Not saying in a newsletter if you don't have something valuable to say reminds me of one of my mantras. You don't need to have a meeting just to have a meeting. Same idea. People really appreciate you for that. The attachment to the schedule is less important than the content, like you're saying. That's really good. I know we get a lot of mixed messaging and you need to keep up with your posting calendar and things like this, but a lot of thought leaders are really particular about how they share their message and how often they share their message, and they are still very potent in what they're sharing. So this idea that we need to be everywhere all at once and be a jack of all trades, I really push against, because I've built an entire career off of a really niched aquatic thought leadership topic, and there's endless amount of work. Sure, there are opportunities to be an expert in a lot of different areas of our sector, but I also think anybody that can answer any question that you have is probably going wide and not deep. That's part of the thing I want to caution us against is we don't need more width. We need more depth. as our industry becomes more and more young, as we're seeing people spend less and less time in the industry before they move on to something else, or they kind of for a couple years and it burns out. Or these are all things we have to be mindful and aware of as the industry becomes more of a rotating door. It might feel like we need to be wide because we keep needing to catch people up. But if that's the case, then it's going to take us decades to socialize safety concepts and make sure that everyone understands different types of research and best practices around code and education and how people acquire skills and learning, life saving practices and mental health resources, all of these things. So I think this is a responsibility on all of us to also check ourselves. When it's tempting to go wide, we have to find more ways to keep going deep and make sure that we know that we're part of the solution.
To your point about going deep, I heard an AI consultant, they were invited to speak at the Alberta Association of Aquatic Professionals meeting in the spring. One of the things he shared about AI I thought was an amazing basic threshold is he said there's free public AI and then there's paid AI. Wherever possible, if you think you want to use AI, pay $10 a month to use the paid AI. He said, I promise you it's so much better in terms of learning what you need and being more selective. To circle back to what you said about marketing, many aquatic professionals don't realize the way that Google populates search results to something as simple as swimming pool pump is not based necessarily on natural interest or accuracy. It's going to be ranked based on paid placement, keywords, target terms, all of that. Like you said, equity and AI is problematic because if we're training the system on broad principles that don't apply to all populations, it's going to default to giving us answers that don't reflect the needs of diverse populations. So I guess where I was going with this is to say we don't know the back end of AI. We don't know how it's trained or learned, but it has been my personal experience with a few platforms. Paying a small fee is infinitely better in what it's churning out.
There's so many like fun little avenues from this topic. And I think one of the things we haven't touched on is how some people are just really against AI at all costs. What are your thoughts? Do you think that's more misguided from those people that are maybe not realizing where AI is already embedded into products that they're using? There's already so much back end optimization going into products that we don't even realize.
The big thing for me is in some places you need to disclose it. A personal example I can share is I fired my bookkeeper recently because we discovered they were using an AI tool to assist in streamlining the financial reconciliation. Now, if they hadn't disclosed that and my bill had gone down and the accuracy had gone up, I would have no concerns. But the bill had remained the same and the accuracy was significantly less because in hindsight, they were following rule parameters of the AI and no human was auditing the results of the AI. So there were many issues I had, namely the disclosure was the first one. If you're going to use AI, I'm not morally opposed to it, but how is this going to benefit me? My perception is you're budgeting fewer hours than what you had the previous 4 years. I think there's going to be points where AI is absolutely necessary in its disclosure in some compliance pieces like data management, individual privacy, any sort of policy work or human elements. But then I think to your point, behind the scenes, like presumably QuickBooks populates AI structures to fulfill a lot of its functions if it's easy to add on an integration to maximize that or change it. I know Riverside, the platform we're using to chat, has been a godsend for me. I've used it for almost 4 years. And very, very early on, they offered transcription and closed captioning tools. We still need a human with aquatic experience to read them because they don't understand the pool terminology very easily. In service is not spelled correctly, but it's been absolutely critical in terms of how I want to be reaching people in more accessible ways through providing accurate closed captions. YouTube would auto-generate closed captions at a very poor and less trained rate than the fee I pay to Riverside to do that. I think it is absolutely embedded, whether we know it or not. Canva, many aquatic professionals use Canva. Canva has always had some form of AI. It's gotten significantly more robust in the last 2 years. I'm sure at some point somebody used it, to move a hair off their child's face in a photo. And now it can expand the photo, change the background, generate earrings. And whether we need that or not, it's all the same tech, I think, on the back end.
I love all those considerations because I agree with the accessibility piece. Absolutely. One of the things that I think about too is anybody that's feeling like they need ways to have better boundaries with their workload and people trying to like build a side business. I would really love people to be able to have tools at their disposal that help them reach those goals. I don't want it ever to seem like go and get professional photography done instead of using an AI tool to do your photos because premise alone, because I understand that's not an option for everybody. It is really nuanced in that regard. I would say try to do it as responsibly as you can. And then when you can invest money into things, look at the product and the provider, and that's when you make those educated decisions with having that context. But again, I think it's critical thinking because sometimes AI is not going to save you any time either. If you're putting stuff in and then you do have to go back through and review, it might actually be taking focus and time. But I do think we really need to be honest about what resources we do have, and then we need to find a way to do it intentionally. Just because you can have AI create all these different things for you doesn't mean that's also going to be the best thing for your messaging or brand. So I think that's important to think about too.
I think in my bookkeeping it is a great example where if I am a solopreneur and I don't do my own books, but let's say I was, then that AI tool is a back end product that doesn't impact the frontline customers. Whereas choosing to use an AI image without fixing it or adjusting it or customizing it is very frontline. It's going to be noticed. To your point, I'm not suggesting that people do everything from scratch. For example, I use AI in Canva to give me ideas. If I say, oh, Canva, give me a YouTube thumbnail about AI in aquatics, it's going to give me 7. They don't look good, but I can look at the objects and the idea and then say, okay, let me grab a photo from stock photography or my own pools. And I cobbled together something that looks a lot more homemade, but I'm happy with where I didn't have to dream up the idea, but I'm not just copying wholesale what you might end up with next week if you also ask Canva for aquatics and
Yeah.
correct, because it's going to share it. Like that's the piece that a lot of rec professionals don't realize. Somebody in Frisco, Texas is literally using the same graphic as somebody in Providence, Rhode Island. That's, I think, where customers gloss by because it looks so predictable or similar. Like, we see these same graphics in all of our networks because we're so involved.
I don't work for a city government anymore, but my husband does. And they've had some very basic training on certain things to plug and not plug into these sources. I don't even have any beginning understanding about what is happening with the information you upload. Of course, they're scrubbing sites and search terms and all articles and all kinds of stuff. So if you already have a public facing website and you're already a thought leader, it's going to scrub some of that stuff. But whatever you're feeding into it, I'm not sure how this works. But if I'm over here and saying, here's a blog post I've already written with 15 in-service ideas, can you just edit this for context? I'm not sure if you jump on Katie and say, give me 10 ideas. Are they taking 10 of the 15 original ideas that I uploaded in there, just slightly spinning it and then giving it to you? I'm a very big proponent of I share my content, I share my slides, I share all my stuff. But knowing we don't know what's happening with that, it's also something to be mindful of. You might be watering down your own distinct voice if you're feeding something really unique to you into AI. I don't even know all the ramifications, but because I don't, it makes me just be a little bit more aware that I don't really know what's going on with the stuff that I'm putting in here.
To that point, with any sort of paid platform, so we're on riverside.fm, I can go into the terms and conditions or I email my account rep and say, what is the current policy for data sharing, data storage? People who are interested in that, especially municipalities or organizations, state or federal, that have a legal responsibility to know what's happening, you have somewhat more control in a confined, paywalled environment than you do with your free level of Perplexity or Chat GPT. So I think that is also an accountability piece we need to think about, where to your point, I don't know if the transcriptions of my videos are just out there for anyone to find, but I presume at a basic level, because I'm a paywalled account, they're helping train the AI in my account better and the servers of the platform in general. But most of the other people on this platform are not talking about pools. They're talking about more mainstream topics.
It's all very interesting, and it's moving quick too. Just this week, I was in California doing some customized training, and we were talking about neurodivergence. What we say today, next time I'm here, or even a day, a week, a month, a year from now, can be radically different. This field is very similar, or we're just going a million miles a minute. And so I know this will be an evolving topic for us as we navigate it and we figure it out. We're all new to this too. We're used to being jack of all trades in aquatics because we manage the staff. We are doing maintenance, we're doing programming, we're doing all this types of things. Now we also have to be experts about how to do some of this stuff as well. That's just part of the game as times change and practices change and staying on top of it, staying mindful about it. So an interesting conversation for sure.
This came up in our conversation last night, and I recently had this experience as well. Revisiting the softwares and platforms we already have, either for new modules or new features that we're not already using. The person last night mentioned they have had a software at their organization for a long time that hasn't been largely applicable to aquatics, but it had been a few years since she logged in to see what was available to use feature wise. And she realized a bunch of their features would now apply to certain aspects of aquatics. They didn't need to go out and research a new platform or buy a new service or use AI. They literally already had something. I'm the same. I have a CRM I've been using for 3 years, customer resource management software. I do one specific thing with it. And then recently I realized something I've been doing in an Excel sheet, very old school and inefficient, could be done in a module of the platform they already had and never explored. Because in aquatics, we like to do things the same way for consistency and safety, but then we're also not curious because we don't have time to be curious, but maybe as an action item for people to say, okay, if you're watching this video and you've been curious about AI because you're feeling a lot of friction at work and time deprivation, what is one or two friction points you can take some time and check in with your booking software, facility software, organizational software? Maybe there's a solution already there available to you. Do you have anything else you want to cover?
I know we talk through a lot of different areas of this, and I'm excited to see how it unfolds and what other topics might come up with time.